On the weekend, I read a most terrifying document. And I beg our leaders, any politicians watching tonight, in fact, all Australians, to read it as well before it's too late. The document is this one: a look at our defence mobilisation planning here and giving examples overseas. In other words, in a war, how do we mobilise all the civilians and supplies that our small defence force would need to defend us, particularly from, say, China? We have just 85,000 people in our defence forces, even when we include all our army reservists. There is no way that's enough in a war with China. And this report, done by the giant RAND Corporation, very prestigious defence think tank, done at the request of the Australian Defence Force, looks at how prepared our ADF and our government are for such a full-on mobilisation. And I have to tell you, this report makes scarily clear we are nowhere near ready. We have not even begun to be ready. The army isn't ready. The government isn't ready. Our industry isn't ready. And the Australian people are not ready and may never be. Read it. Now, I know you'll find that the language in this study is all very polite, boring even. And so you might not immediately grasp the chaos it actually describes when it very politely says that our Defence Force does not yet effectively or explicitly incorporate a whole-of-nation construct, such as social cohesion, citizen support, and material and psychological resilience into its planning or doctrine. So rather than just quote pages of that kind of language, let me sum up exactly what it does say. In an extreme crisis, war with China, we will need to quickly draft lots of extra manpower into the war effort, especially experts, cyber experts for sure. We would also, and I know this is fairly obvious, we would also need to rush in supplies, transport food, medical supplies, all sorts of equipment. And we'd need stockpiles of all the critical stuff that we now ship in, like microprocessors, essential for computers. I tell you, if China takes over Taiwan, 2/3 of the processors that make these sort of things, they'll be gone. They'll be in Chinese hands. So we would need a full-on mobilisation. But then this report goes through all the things that we have not done, unlike countries like Finland, Sweden, US. Let me list some of these things. We have not even had a formal review for more than 30 years of who or what we would need to mobilise, what kind of people we need to mobilise and how. The plan we have today, says this report, is the wrong one. It assumes for a start that we have a big industrial base to help us out, as if we wish, because we don't. It's true. Once, nearly a third of Australians worked in manufacturing, but manufacturing now makes up just 6% of our economy. 6%, that's much less than for most countries. And as the report says, this virus pandemic has just proved to us how dependent we are on foreign supplies. 90% of our medicines must be imported, just for a start. So what happens if our supplies are cut off by war or naval blockade? What can we actually make here in Australia that we would need to keep fighting? Now, the report says, well, sure, we're at least now trying to build our own warships. That's a start. But even in defence industries, it warns us, we rely on big multinational companies. But in a war, how can we be sure if these multinationals will be on our side or put us first? Well, that's frightening enough. If, say, again, China cuts off our supplies, we won't last long. We can't even make much petrol for ourselves anymore. Nor do we have many ships of our own left for transport. This report says we might need to create a merchant navy. But our problems get even worse. This report says the ADF has not identified exactly what experts it would need and how to get them. Industry has not been asked to help with such planning, as it is in, say, Finland. And our politicians have not even started to get us psychologically ready to help fight a prolonged war. The public does not have any idea of the need to help our military, it warns, and we have no military tradition, no national service, and no compelling national narrative to inspire them to. That's what it says. And it may well be that we're too divided to defend ourselves in a total war.
On your colonisation. Hurry up! Oh, it. Burn this place to the ground!
In short, this report to our ADF makes clear we are sitting ducks in a real war. And that's without even talking about the problems we've discussed before on the show in buying all the new hardware we suddenly need urgently, like new submarines, like the new joint fighters. We have been lazy. We have been complacent. We have been blind. And we're divided and flabby, utterly dependent on overseas supplies that could be cut off in an instant. And if we don't wake up and trouble does hit, we're toast. Joining me to discuss this is someone who's been a cadet, an officer and an Army reservist for 47 years, served 3 times overseas on deployments and worked on white papers on defence planning. She's Catherine McGregor, now also a host of the McGregor Angle on Sky News, and I asked her how credible this report is.
Well, I've got great regard for the RAND organisation. They do terrific data-driven reporting. They've done some exceptional work. They cover a number of areas, Andrew. People may choose to level accusations that their funding is from a combination of US government agencies and also arms manufacturers, but they're transparent about the sources of their funding and they collaborate with credible academic institutions. So a RAND study on either a weapons platform or on defence doctrine or capabilities warrants serious weight. I hold them in very high regard, and I know the strategic community does also.
But what about its findings here? Basically, they say that this country is completely unready for a mobilisation that we would need in times of a serious war. We don't know what kind of people we want. We don't know how to get them. We don't know 100%. Where the materials are, and we've got terrible supply lines and we haven't done the stockpiling. I mean, it's just a frightening picture that it paints.
It is frightening and it's also accurate, Andrew, and as many of your viewers would know, Jim Molan, a regular contributor to Sky and serving senator and former distinguished general in the Australian Army, has been warning about this for years. There's an Air Vice Marshal, John Blackburn, an old boss of mine and someone I collaborated with during my service career as well. Both have been warning about our vulnerabilities in that we have not got stockpiles of fuel, we don't hold large stockpiles or large enough stockpiles of munitions, and that should our sea lines of communication be subject to interdiction in a great power war, and let's not beat about the bush, there is a real threat now in the Indo-Pacific from an expansive, assertive China, which is on our doorstep with a facility being developed at Daru. So we are not holding substantial oil, lubricants and fuel. We don't have enough munitions to survive the initial engagement, and we frankly don't have much sovereign capability in terms of making defence munitions and replacing the ammunition and so forth that we expend in the event that there are hostilities. And the problem is a whole-of-nation problem, as this report so aptly identifies.
Well, on that very point, Catherine, this whole-of-nation thing, it makes clear, and I think correctly, that the Australian public isn't part of this conversation. It doesn't know about it. It doesn't have a tradition of military service. It doesn't have national service. We seem divided. There's not a national narrative to bind us together, it says. And basically, without that, you're not going to have a total war because people don't even know that they have to contribute to the military, let alone that they want to. I mean, it just seems we haven't actually started the conversation we would need to mount the kind of national effort that would help us in a time of war.
That is absolutely correct, Andrew. And where does one start with this discussion? I know you talk often and make points about identity politics. As a nation, this starts at the very top. Do we really believe in who we are? Are we proud of who we are? Do we think there are things that are worth dying for as a nation? Alexander Hamilton, the great US statesman, said that a nation that prefers safety to danger is ready for a master, and it will find one. And there's been a dispiriting decline in our national narrative, I think, in the last 20 or so years. The 21st century has not been a great era in Australian history. Two things about our military. They are largely out of sight. They are in small garrison detachments around the country. And there's a cosy mythology about, everyone had an Anzac that they can trace back to World War I. But the fact is, we have a small, niche, professional military force, but our societal resilience is not great. We don't valorise resilience in individuals anymore. We as a society reward victimhood, and victim narratives sell much more than survival and toughness narratives. Look at the heroes of Twitter, Magda Szubanski and Benjamin Law, yet an Andrew Hastie or a Heston Russell are reviled, or a Jim Molan are sneered at as war criminals. And yet each of those men has put their life on the line for this country. So you really do ask whether, as a society, are we values driven? Have we faced an existential threat and actually had to own responsibility for our sovereignty? For a long time, Andrew, we've been very blessed in this nation in that the dominant maritime power globally has been aligned with our value set, whether that was Great Britain with its vast Royal Navy policing our sea lanes, or its successor in the maritime domain, the United States of America. And we have ridden on the coattails of both of them. But most of our military commitments have been essentially a flag in the sand to show the United States or Great Britain that we're reliable allies, and to pay a dividend, down payment rather, on a security guarantee that we get on the cheap.
Yes, but of course, as America's power wanes, we can't rely on that anymore. We have to start increasingly
100%.
looking to our own defence, and we are woefully behind on that. Catherine McGregor, you expressed this matter so very well, and I really do think this is a moment of national awakening for us if we're going to do what is necessary in order to defend ourselves. I hope it doesn't come to that, but boy, it'll be too late to say we should have if it does. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.